2014. Oh. Is it on now? Okay. Should I start over? Okay. Since 2008, Karen Lindsay has been a practitioner at the Centers for Spiritual Living and a minister since 2014. Since 2019, she has served as an interim minister. She was ordained in 2018. Karen also has a focus ministry called Fearlessly Feral Living and produces a podcast of the same name, found wherever you listen to podcasts. She began designing her own workshops, classes, and retreats before the ink on her practitioner's license was dry, and this has been one of her specialties. She loves seeing people enter her workshops with confusion and lack and see them exit with clarity and abundance. Karen is sought after as a guest speaker, having spoken at Unity at the Lake, Unity Sacramento, and Centers for Spiritual Living in Bakersfield, Grass Valley, Auburn, Sacramento, Placerville, Reno, Lake Tahoe, and Las Vegas. She lives in a small rural town in northern Nevada on a 2.5-acre ranchette with her 2 horses, 2 dogs, and 2 cats. She loves to ride her horses, garden, cook, and attend potlucks. Last time Karen was due to speak here, we had our biggest snowstorm of the spring, and Karen had to appear on Zoom. So we're very happy to have her here again today in person. The title of Karen's talk today is Giant Gentleness. So I welcome Karen up to the platform. Please push record.
Good morning, everybody. Move this down for short people here. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here today, and I'm very honored to once again be here in person. Yes, the snowstorm, but you know what? I'm so grateful for Zoom, because when that happens, we can meet on Zoom and still come together and do our thing. So I'm really grateful for that. Yeah, so yes, my topic today is giant gentleness. And there's a little tagline here. It says, "Your gentleness is showing." And I want to begin by asking you a few questions, because gentleness, the road to gentleness sometimes is a long one. It's a bit of a journey. And I can share with you that I have been asked all of these questions myself, and my answers showed me that I wasn't being very gentle with myself at the time when I first heard these questions. Now, it's much better. I'm much gentler. So, here's your questions. Would you let anybody else speak to you the way you speak to yourself? Think about that one for a while. And do you think it might be time to retire your superhuman cape? You know, the one you put on when you have a daily list of things to do that even super person couldn't complete? The one you wear when you push yourself so hard that you get so tired that you can't sleep? That kind of stuff. The to-do list is just impossible. And then we beat ourselves up for not being able to do everything on the to-do list. And then there's this pesky little law of attraction that is there, whether we like it or not, which says that how we treat others is a direct result of who we are. And so this brings me to my third question for you. How on earth do you think you can be gentle with others if you are not gentle with yourself? Because everything begins within. So while you ponder your answers to those questions, I'd like to talk about awareness and compassion and gratitude as spiritual practices, and oneness as a spiritual principle, to facilitate within us a giant gentleness that creates a life grander and more beautiful than anything any of us could have imagined. I love being gentle with myself. You know, sometimes those feelings come in that don't feel quite so good. Giant gentleness says that I can allow those feelings without judgment and yet work towards possibly changing some of those feelings. That's what giant gentleness has done for me. It's allowed me to allow myself to be in the space that I'm in and also work to move to be in a better space. So yeah, sometimes we get into that judgment about ourselves, and I don't know about you, but when I'm judging myself, I'm also judging others. And I've learned a little something about that judgment. I've learned that judgment always speaks more to who we are than the person or thing we are judging. And in our judgment lies an opportunity to examine ourselves for what is crying out for healing. I always know when I'm judging, and I always also see it as a time, an opportunity for something within me to be healed when that happens. And so when the judgment comes up, I don't beat myself up for being judgmental. I'm gentle with myself. And I recognize it, and I say, oh, Karen, what's that all about? Let's take a look at this. And then we can heal whatever it is that's coming up. But if we continue judging, if we fight the healing, that judgment will turn around and bite us in the rear every single time. We become victims of it. Unless we take responsibility for our own healing, judgment will always harm the one doing the judging. And then it'll spread that harm around like a form of psychological COVID that just sort of takes over everything. So today I'd like to invite you in the pursuit of giant gentleness to set an intention to move beyond judgment of self and others, to move beyond speaking to ourselves harshly, to move beyond speaking about others harshly, and to move beyond pushing ourselves beyond reasonable limits. Let's be gentle with ourselves by being aware of when we are judging and by replacing that inner critic with inner divinity within each and every one of us. And recognize that we can acknowledge our humanity and also recognize our own inner divinity and be gentle with ourselves. Ernest Holmes said that there is something about you and me that is cosmic, universal, that stretches over time and space. Let us learn to think better of ourselves. So how do we do that? Well, I just mentioned it. I just gave you a little hint there. When I talked about our inner divinity, there's a spiritual principle called oneness. And this principle says that God is everywhere present, including, and I like to add especially, in each and every one of you and in me. I like to say we're all little godlings running around on this earth. And in that oneness, we get to embody qualities of spirit. Gentleness is a quality of spirit. Not being gentle is something else. When inseparable with God, that God is a part of us and that we are a part of it. And yeah, I don't know about you, but when I think about oneness, because God's kind of a nebulous sort of a thing, and we all have different definitions of it. So I like to go into qualities of spirit and say, how can I be love today? How can I be light today? How can I be life today? How can I be peace? How can I be power? How can I be joy? How can I be beauty? And I set an intention to be those things, those qualities of spirit. And I feel my own oneness with God. I feel my own divinity. And that in turn allows me to be gentle with myself. And then I move into spiritual practices. So once I've got that principle of oneness down within me, and I'm feeling my own divinity, and I'm being those qualities of spirit, then I can move into practices. And I got to tell you guys, my most favorite spiritual practice of all time is introspection, going within. I really think that it's a valuable practice for us to truly know who and what we are. And through the spiritual practice of introspection, we can become aware of what we do and feel and be in our humanity. And once we feel and do and be, then we can practice some compassion and gratitude. And we repeat that as often as necessary. You know, that thing called introspection can also be called inner self-awareness. And I want to suggest that we cannot be gentle with ourselves unless we first know ourselves. We have to know everything about ourselves. We were having a conversation before everybody else got here about our strengths and our weaknesses. And one lady said, I know my strengths, and that is not one of them. How profound is that? That's a lady who knows herself. I know my strengths, and that is not one of them. We get to know ourselves, and we get to know what our strengths are in this world and what our strengths are not in this world. And we get to be gentle by allowing our strengths to shine and by allowing other people to shine in those areas that we might not be so strong in. And it all kind of fits together. So we get to know ourselves consciously, and we might do some exercises. You know, we might sit down and ask ourselves questions. And one of mine, I call it chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole, where I'm feeling a certain way, and I might ask myself, why am I feeling that? And of the answer, I'll say, why? And of the answer to that, I will say, why? And of the answer to that, I will say, why? And just chase that little rabbit down that hole and eventually get to the point where I don't have any more answers and I've got some real good information about myself. And if I've practiced that gentleness and that compassion, and I'm knowing my inner divinity and my oneness with spirit, then answer allows me to know and feel, okay, this is my strength and this is not. If we do these kinds of practices often enough, eventually we come to a place where we always know at any given time without consciously doing anything what we're feeling, how we're showing up in the world. And if something comes along and throws a speed bump at us, we almost effortlessly take a little break, a little pause, and go, oh, what's that about? And we go within. And this is a way of being gentle with ourselves. When I do these kinds of things and I go within and I discover there's something about me that, in this instance, that I want to change, then I decide, okay, what do I want to change it to? See, I'm not stuck on the part that's not serving me so well. I'm not judging the part that's not serving me well. I'm just saying, you know, it probably served me really well before, but it's not serving so well anymore. And so I release it with giant gentleness and gratitude. and then I replace it with something that serves me better. So each day, each week, for the foreseeable future, we get to expand our awareness of gentleness. I like to do things when I'm presented with a concept or a word like gentleness. I like to go to the dictionary and look it up. And then I like to go to the thesaurus and look up the antonyms and the synonyms for the word. So I did that with gentleness. And I found some interesting stuff. Gentleness means intentional mildness. Now, have you ever noticed that when the prayer chaplains here get up to say their prayers and their invocations and their meditations, how gentle their voice becomes? I've noticed it. That's giant gentleness, guys. Intentional mildness. Gentle also means kindly, moderate. I have a tough time with moderation. I really do. Sometimes most of the time it's all black or all white. There are no in-betweens. There are no moderates. And I have to remind myself, oh, Karen, okay, come on, dial it back a little bit. All things in balance. Gentleness also means sweet and tender. The antonyms for gentle: hard, impervious, rough. And then I had to look up that word impervious because I knew kind of what it meant, but not totally. It means not able to be penetrated. If we're impervious, if we're not being gentle with ourselves, guess what? We're not practicing the principle of oneness. We've shut ourselves off from connection with spirit. We've blocked it. And I don't know about you guys, but when I block that connection, it does not feel good, and it is not gentle. I'm blocking my very essence, my divinity, my core when I do that. And when I'm judging, I'm doing that. It's not fun. So it behooves us to strive for giant gentleness and move away from judgment of ourselves and others. We start with ourselves. We acknowledge that we can allow all of our moments to be for our highest and best. We move beyond the judgments of ourselves in all those feelings and thoughts and emotions that come up, and we simply allow them. And we embrace active compassion for ourselves and for others, because that's how the law of attraction works. We breathe gentleness into our communities and our politics and our activities and all of it. We celebrate the moments when we can truly embody the giant gentleness, and we continue on this journey. There's one other thing about gentleness. Gentleness is not just about letting yourself off the hook and giving yourself a free pass. There's an element, I call it gentle discipline in life, that is a really cool thing to do. I think gentle discipline is a spiritual practice, honestly. It's when we have certain things in our life that we know are good for us, that we need to practice or do on a daily basis, like maybe exercise or take a walk or eat right or whatever it is that's being called for us. Do my spiritual practices every day, that's a biggie. I practice gentle discipline with myself, and I make sure I carve out time to do spiritual practices every single day. I make sure to take a nice walk that gets my heart rate elevated every single day. And I do that without judging myself, and I don't beat myself if I don't do it, but I strive towards gentle discipline to do those things every day, because I am worth it. And so are all of you guys. Everybody's worth it. Gentleness is not weakness or meekness. But we don't get to give ourselves a free pass and not do the things that we've promised ourselves we would do to live life more successfully. Gentleness will remind us that we are so much more than we give ourselves credit for. Gentleness allows us to open up to any pain that we might be feeling, any sorrow we might be feeling, any fear we might be feeling, any doubt. And it allows us to be open to all of that unpleasant, icky stuff and accept it and say, yeah, but I got this divinity thing going on. I got this spirit within me stuff going on. And this is a wonderful place to be. And there's spirit even in the doubt, and even in the fear, and even in the pain, and even in the sorrow. It's in everything, because don't we say God is everywhere present? It's in all of it. So why would we deny that? So we allow it with gentleness. I have a saying myself. I say, okay, Karen, you're allowed to go in the backyard and eat worms for 10 minutes. Then you're going to come back in and be gentle with myself, but you can only eat worms for 10 minutes. You can only be in self-pity for 10 minutes or however long it is. Sometimes it's longer depending on the situation. So to be gentle with ourselves and others, in addition to the principle of oneness and being, joy and peace and love and light and life and power and beauty, all those qualities of spirit. Here's some practical tips for you. Be who you are. And this brings me right back to introspection, because in order to be who we are, we got to know who we are. Be who you are. Part of being in this human form is living with fear, anxiety, and doubt sometimes. You've been you for a really long time. You talk to yourself in worse ways than you would let anybody else talk to you. You deserve better. You get to think better of yourself, as Ernest Holmes says. That personal self-awareness that I'm advocating, compassion comes from that. Because when we're aware of all of us, of our totality, of everything about us, and we're being gentle with ourselves, we get to have compassion for all of our bits and pieces. Jack Kornfield says, if your compassion does not include yourself, it's incomplete. When we say God is everywhere present, including within us, I don't know about you guys, but from that, I take a tiny little step and get to a place where I know that everything in life is sacred. And when we know that everything in life is sacred, that means everything. So when we're being gentle with ourselves, and we might be laying on the couch and watching TV and eating popcorn, that's a sacred act. Everything we do is sacred. Everything is sacred. We do learn from our experiences and we choose differently in the future. But what's going on right here and right now, it is sacred. And we get to show ourselves some gratitude. That saying, Meister Eckhart says it. If the only prayer I ever say is thank you, it's enough. And I use gratitude sometimes to turn my thinking around when I'm mumbling and grumbling and looking out at the world and going, I don't like this and I don't like that and that sucks. And, all that stuff. I look for things to be grateful for and it turns it around instantly. So we practice some gratitude. So, as of today, I hope You are going to go out into the world and build a culture of giant gentleness, a culture where you are completely and totally comfortable in your own skin 24/7. And additionally, a culture where you're allowed to mess up without it being the end of the world. A culture where you love yourself more often than not, and when you don't, that's okay too. In building a culture of giant gentleness, you get to be yourself. You get to be different. You get to be unique. You get to fail, but you also get to succeed. And you get to have bad days, but you also get to have good days. And you get to set boundaries. You get to say what does and does not work for you. So we be gentle with ourselves, and we become open, and we allow that sunlight of the Spirit, that divinity, that stuff that is, that thing, that God stuff to flow in and through and as us. And we know that life is always working and conspiring for our highest good. And that's what giant gentleness looks like. So I thank you guys very much. And I think I need to close with a prayer, don't I? Yes, indeedy. And so, once again, returning to that place of oneness, acknowledging and recognizing that God is indeed everywhere present, and knowing that this God is living and moving and breathing in and as me, that these words that I speak and have spoken and continue to speak are all God's words, because I am a part of God and it is a part of me. And so I speak my word today as we move out into the world, that we are each embodying all of those beautiful qualities of Spirit. We are walking in love. We are looking out on the world with peace and joy. We are embodying giant gentleness with ourselves and with others. And we are doing this in all of our affairs. And I know this to be true for everyone present here today. And I affirm that life is good and very good, and all is well. And I release my word into that law that always says yes. And it has done so already. And so I am complete and I anchor. And so it is. Thank you very much.